What if hatred could be engineered? What if a single man, frustrated, ignored, insignificant, could convince an entire nation that murder was necessary? Not in secret, not in silence, but legally, industrially, proudly. This is the story of how Adolf Hitler turned hatred into policy, and policy into genocide. Before the gas chambers, before the trains of death, before the word Holocaust existed, there was only a dangerous idea. Some humans are worth less than others. That idea spread like a virus. It infected newspapers, it poisoned politics, it rewired the minds of millions. Neighbors turned into informants, teachers turned into propagandists, doctors turned into executioners. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to belong. What we are about to reveal is not comfortable and it's not distant. The Holocaust wasn't created by monsters. It was created by ordinary people who chose obedience over conscience. So today, we're going to expose how a failed artist became the architect of the largest genocide in modern history, and how a nation allowed it to happen. But before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Talking History. After that, leave a comment telling us what other terrifying chapters of history you want us to uncover. All right, take a breath, because from this point on, there is no turning back. He never imagined he would become a monster. Before the war speeches, before the swastikas, before the gas chambers, there was only a young man with trembling hands holding a sketchbook. Vienna, early 20th century. The city was alive, opera houses glowing in golden light, cafes overflowing with poets, musicians, dreamers. In that world of art and ambition, an 18-year-old named Adolf Hitler arrived, believing destiny had finally opened its doors. He carried nothing but a suitcase, a portfolio of drawings, and the desperate conviction that he was meant to become a great artist. But Vienna didn't see talent in his charcoal sketches. When he stood in front of the admissions panel of the Academy of Fine Arts, Hitler wasn't expecting admiration. He was expecting validation. He thought the professors would look at his drawings and see genius. Instead, they saw something else: lack of technique, weakness in human figure drawing, insufficient talent for academic art. One examiner simply said, "No." Hitler stood frozen, as if the world had cracked beneath his feet. Rejection stung, but rejection repeated was humiliation. He applied again. Again he was denied. And humiliation has a way of finding a place to live inside a person. Hitler wandered Vienna's streets numbly. He survived selling watercolor postcards, slept in shelters for the homeless, and spent long winter nights shivering in public libraries. He watched wealthy students coming and going from cafes, laughing, eating well, everything he wasn't. Something in him hardened, and bitterness is always searching for a target. Vienna was a mosaic of cultures: Jewish merchants, Slavic workers, German aristocrats, Hungarian bankers, a vibrant collision of people and languages. But to someone drowning in failure, that diversity didn't represent opportunity. It represented threat. In cheap newspapers left on cafe tables, he began reading pamphlets that blamed Jews for corruption, crime, moral decline, for anything that was wrong in society. It was irrational, but it was simple. And simple answers are seductive when your life feels like chaos. One thought began whispering inside him: maybe it isn't my fault. He discovered a rising political figure: Vienna's mayor Karl Lueger, charismatic, confident, openly anti-Semitic. Lueger used hatred the way others used paint or words, strategically. He blamed the Jewish population for economic decline and used fear to gather votes. People applauded him. They believed him. Hitler watched and learned. Words could become weapons. Crowds could become armies. Hate could become power. Slowly, resentment replaced ambition. The young artist faded. Something darker took his place. He stopped dreaming of museums and exhibitions. He started imagining enemies. His failure wasn't just a personal wound, it became a blueprint. And the hatred that first formed inside a homeless shelter in Vienna was a quiet ember waiting for oxygen. He had lost the world he wanted, so he decided to destroy the world he blamed. Vienna was dazzling on the surface, but beneath the lights and elegance, the city was rotting. While opera houses celebrated genius and cafes debated philosophy, another conversation echoed in the streets, darker and venomous. The newspapers sold hatred as truth, and politicians used racism like a ladder to reach power. Into this world walked Adolf Hitler. He was hungry, homeless, invisible. He spent his days wandering the Ringstrasse, staring at buildings he could never enter, watching people he envied walk into theaters and cafes. Vienna was a paradise where he did not belong, and resentment thrives in isolation. Hitler began observing people not as individuals, but as categories. The cafes were filled with businessmen, bankers, editors, many of them Jewish. In his mind, success and Jewish identity became inseparable. Failure and personal responsibility faded into the background. If he wasn't admitted to the Academy of Fine Arts, it was not because of lack of talent. It was because someone had stolen the opportunities he deserved. He just needed a name for the enemy. The city gave him one. Karl Lueger, Vienna's mayor, was charming, sophisticated, and openly anti-Semitic. He spread poison with a smile. His speeches blamed Jews for the economy, for immigration, for moral decay. Crowds adored him. They did not cheer facts. They cheered the relief of having someone to blame. Hitler stood in the crowd, absorbing every word. He didn't just hear Lueger, he studied him. The timing of the pauses, the modulation of the voice, the theatrical movements of the hands. Lueger didn't simply speak, he performed. And the audience didn't just listen, they obeyed. Hitler realized something transformative. You don't need truth to move a nation. You only need someone to hate. He started reading political pamphlets polluted with racial science, theories claiming Jews were biologically inferior. He read nationalist authors preaching the idea of a pure Aryan race destined to rule. Each book added fuel to a fire that had started with artistic failure and personal humiliation. In Vienna, Hitler learned that hatred can be dressed as patriotism, conspiracy theories can replace facts, and the crowd will follow whoever screams loudest. The man who once walked the city selling postcards now walked it with a different purpose. He was gathering ammunition, not bullets, ideas. And ideas, when sharpened, can kill more than any weapon ever forged. The city did not make him a murderer. It taught him how a murderer could become a leader. The sound of gunfire echoed across Europe. Summer of 1914. A single bullet fired in Sarajevo ignited an inferno that would swallow nations. The world had never seen anything like it. Millions of soldiers marching, trenches stretching like open graves, the sky blackened by artillery smoke. For most young men, the war was terror. For Adolf Hitler, it was salvation. He had been rejected by society, forgotten by Vienna, crushed by failure. But the war offered something he had never felt before: belonging. He rushed to enlist, not in the Austrian army, his homeland, but in the German army. He wrote in his request, "I feel more German than Austrian." Germany accepted him. It was the first institution that ever did. On the front lines, Hitler finally had a purpose. He became a messenger, a dangerous role requiring him to run between trenches under constant enemy fire. He wasn't brave in the way legends describe. He was disciplined, obedient, a man who followed orders without hesitation. His fellow soldiers saw him as strange, distant, fanatical, but the army noticed his unwavering loyalty and gave him medals for courage. For the first time in his life, someone said, "You are valuable." But the war that gave him purpose would also give him his ideology. When Germany surrendered in 1918, Hitler was recovering in a hospital from a gas attack. A soldier delivered the news: Germany has fallen. Hitler refused to believe it. On the front, they had fought with all their strength. How could a country that still had soldiers in the trenches simply collapse? Then came the whispers. We didn't lose. We were betrayed. The politicians surrendered. The Jews and the communists stabbed us in the back. It was a lie, but lies are powerful when they offer an explanation for pain. The Treaty of Versailles crushed Germany. Massive war debts, loss of territories, a military reduced to humiliation, national pride destroyed. Crowds felt angry, lost, humiliated. Hitler felt something else, confirmation. All the frustration he had nurtured in Vienna suddenly fused with national humiliation. What had been personal hatred now became collective hatred. He found not just an enemy, he found an audience. Standing among the ruins of defeat, Hitler discovered something far more intoxicating than art, far more addictive than belonging: revenge. Germany's suffering became his mission. His mission needed a cause, and his cause required a target. He didn't pick the Jews because of logic. He chose them because hatred gave him power. The war didn't create Hitler, but it forged the weapon he was becoming. Germany was collapsing from the inside. The war was over, but the battlefield remained, not in trenches, but in the streets, in the banks, in the empty dinner tables of millions of families. Inflation consumed everything. Mothers carried baskets full of worthless bills just to buy bread. Children played with stacks of money because it was cheaper than toys. A loaf of bread that once cost a few marks now cost billions. Desperation changes people, and desperate people will follow anyone who promises hope. Hitler returned from the war furious, disoriented, clutching the belief that Germany had been betrayed. In 1919, he attended a meeting of a tiny political group, the German Workers' Party. There were barely 25 members inside a beer hall, talking nonsense about politics. Hitler didn't go there looking for power. He went looking for a fight. But then he stood up and spoke, and the room changed. His voice trembled at first, then sharpened. He spoke of betrayal, humiliation, lost pride. He didn't offer solutions, only enemies, and people listened. They nodded, they clapped, they believed. The party recruited him immediately. Within months, Hitler transformed the German Workers' Party into something else entirely, a movement built on rage, myth, revenge. He redesigned its symbol, its colors, its name. He renamed it the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazi Party. But Hitler didn't want politics. He wanted a stage. He mastered propaganda like an artist masters paint. Giant red banners, torches illuminating the night, marching boots echoing like thunder. He turned politics into theater. People didn't just agree with him, they surrendered to him. When the Great Depression struck in 1929, Germany's economy shattered. Factories closed, banks collapsed, millions became unemployed overnight. Hope evaporated. And Hitler offered a new version of salvation. Follow me, and Germany will rise again. He promised jobs, he promised order, he promised greatness, but there was a price: obedience and a common enemy: the Jews, the communists, anyone who wasn't pure. In 1933, Hitler became chancellor. A month later, the parliament building mysteriously caught fire. Hitler blamed the communists and convinced the government to grant him emergency powers. With one law, democracy died. Opposition parties were banned, journalists silenced, political rivals imprisoned or killed. In 1934, he declared himself Führer. The country didn't just accept it, they celebrated it. A broken nation had found its Messiah. But every Messiah demands a sacrifice, and Hitler's sacrifice would be millions. The world saw Germany rising. No one noticed the smoke from the future death camps yet. Hate begins with a word, but genocide begins with paperwork. Once Adolf Hitler held absolute power, hatred ceased to be just ideology. It became administration, laws, forms, lists, signatures. The destruction of millions started not with bullets, but with pens. At first it seemed harmless. A sign on a park bench, "No Jews allowed." A law restricting certain professions, a requirement Jews must register property with the state. Small humiliations disguised as civic order. Propaganda did the rest. Newspapers, films, radio broadcasts, all repeating the same message: Jews are less than human. The goal was simple: make the population stop seeing Jews as people. Then came the Nuremberg laws. Jews could no longer marry non-Jews, hold government jobs, or enjoy citizenship. Their businesses were confiscated, their names removed from public records, their identities erased. Dehumanization had become policy, but Hitler wanted more than exclusion. He wanted disappearance. When the war expanded into Eastern Europe, the Nazis found something: space to isolate, to imprison, to starve, to experiment. Villages were emptied, cities drained. Millions of Jews were forced into ghettos, walled prisons where disease, hunger, and despair took lives slowly. Each ghetto was a waiting room for death. Then, in 1942, Nazi leaders met to finalize what they called the final solution to the Jewish question. A cold administrative phrase. A sentence that would kill 6 million. The plan was industrial. Extermination camps were built across occupied Poland: Auschwitz, Treblinka, Sobibor, Belzec, Chelmo, Majdanek. Unlike concentration camps, which exploited forced labor, extermination camps existed for one purpose only: killing. Cattle cars packed with human beings arrived daily. Families were torn apart on the platform. Officers pointed left or right. One direction meant forced labor, the other meant immediate death. No appeal. No explanation, no mercy. The gas chambers were disguised as showers. Inside, mothers held their children. People prayed, screamed, begged. The doors sealed. Zyklon B pellets dropped from a hatch in the ceiling. Within minutes, silence. Then came efficiency. The bodies were searched for gold teeth. Hair was shaved and used for fabric. Ashes from the crematoria were dumped in rivers or used as fertilizer. Factories of death. Engineers improved ventilation for faster turnaround. Administrators optimized train schedules for higher throughput. Doctors selected who lived and who died. The Holocaust wasn't chaos. It was logistics. It was murder treated as supply chain. When the Red Army approached Auschwitz in 1945, the Nazis tried to erase evidence. They burned files, destroyed crematoriums, marched prisoners into the snow, death marches. But they couldn't erase everything. When the gates finally opened, soldiers saw the unthinkable: living skeletons. Open pits filled with ashes, mountains of shoes, glasses, hair, proof. The world learned that the Holocaust was not the result of uncontrollable hatred. It was the result of controlled obedience. Ordinary people, clerks, engineers, doctors, made genocide function like a business. It didn't take monsters. It only took individuals willing to look away. The war ended, but for millions of survivors, the nightmare didn't. The gates of the camps opened slowly, like a wound being forced apart. Allied soldiers stepped inside expecting prisoners. Instead, they found shadows. Men and women so thin their bones pierced their skin. Children who no longer remembered their own names. Eyes that no longer held the concept of tomorrow. Freedom came too late for most. Many who survived the gas chambers died days later from exhaustion, disease, starvation. Their bodies were alive. Their spirits had been buried long before. And then came the cruelest realization. They had no home to return to. Entire neighborhoods were gone. Synagogues destroyed, cemeteries desecrated, families erased. In cities like Warsaw, Lublin, Krakow, entire Jewish communities had vanished. Not migrated, not fled, vanished. Some survivors walked back to their hometowns only to be met with hostility. Why did you come back? Your house has new owners. There's no place for you here. The survivors of death camps became refugees, not citizens, not neighbors, not welcome. They were placed in displaced persons camps, living once again in barracks behind barbed wire, only this time guarded by Allied troops instead of SS officers. The sign outside no longer said, Arbeit macht frei, but the feeling of captivity was familiar. Another indignity, another waiting room. The world didn't know what to do with them. The United States refused mass immigration, European borders remained closed, and the United Kingdom restricted Jewish immigration to Palestine. Survivors were told to be patient. Patience was a luxury they no longer possessed. Quietly, resistance networks formed. They smuggled Jewish refugees across borders, forged documents, bribed officials. Ships with no flag crossed the Mediterranean in the night, overloaded, leaking, filled with families who had lost everything except a word: home. In 1948, after years of struggle and bloodshed, a nation was born: Israel. For some, it was rebirth. For others, a new conflict. But for the survivors, it was the first time in years they could exist without permission. Yet even in safety, the pain followed. The Holocaust stole more than lives. It stole language. It stole culture. It stole identity. Before the war, Yiddish echoed in streets, markets, theaters, spoken by over 11 million people. After the war, it became a ghost tongue. The language died with its speakers. Faith fractured as well. Some survivors clung to God with desperate devotion. Others abandoned him entirely. A new theology emerged, not of praise, but of silence. How do you believe in God after Auschwitz? No rabbi had an answer. The survivors carried invisible scars, nightmares, guilt, anger. Psychologists later named it trauma. Survivors called it memory, because some wounds never close. Their testimony became the world's conscience. Through the voices of Elie Wiesel, Primo Levi, Viktor Frankl, the world began to understand something terrifying. The Holocaust was not the failure of humanity. It was the expression of what humanity is capable of. Even after liberation, the survivors weren't free. They were merely alive. History is not made only by what happens. Sometimes history is made by what people choose to forget. After the war, the world faced a monstrous question. How could an entire society allow the extermination of millions? Evidence was everywhere. Mountains of shoes, piles of hair, rooms stacked floor to ceiling with confiscated suitcases. Testimonies from survivors were raw and unfiltered, yet even then many chose silence. It was easier not to look into the abyss. The Holocaust revealed something that terrified philosophers, judges, and ordinary people. Evil doesn't need monsters. It only needs indifference. In 1945, the Nuremberg trials began. For the first time, world leaders stood in front of judges to answer for genocide. The Nazis on trial used the same defense: I was only following orders. The judges rejected it. Obedience is not innocence. Documents were shown, photographs projected, films played. Witnesses trembled as they spoke, but they spoke anyway, not for revenge, but for truth. The world finally saw what silence had cost. Museums arose. Memorials were built, names engraved in stone. Each act of remembrance was a rebellion against oblivion, because forgetting is the ally of repetition. As years passed, the survivors aged. Their stories were recorded, not as history lessons, but as warnings. The message was carved on walls, whispered at graves, recited by generations: never again. But those two words are not magic. They require vigilance. Hatred mutates. It hides in new ideologies, new slogans, new enemies. It disguises itself as nationalism, patriotism, morality. The Holocaust did not begin with camps. It began with jokes, rumors, scapegoats, silence. First, they were excluded, then humiliated, then transported, then erased, step by step, law by law, speech by speech, and the world watched. Some out of hatred, many out of fear, most out of indifference. The Holocaust is not just a tragedy of the past, it is a mirror of the present. Whenever we dehumanize, whenever we look away, whenever we remain silent while someone is isolated or humiliated, the process begins again. Every museum, every memorial, every film, every testimony exists for one reason: to make sure that when hate knocks again, humanity answers differently. Not with silence, not with indifference, but with memory. Because memory is resistance and remembrance is responsibility. Never again is not a phrase. It is a commitment to the dead, a warning to the living, a demand to the future. History is not just written in dates and documents. History is written in choices. During the Holocaust, millions of people were persecuted, tortured, and exterminated, not because of what they did, but because of who they were. Their lives were reduced to numbers, their voices silenced by policies, by propaganda, and by the indifference of those who chose not to see. But memory refuses to remain silent. The survivors taught us that remembering is not an intellectual exercise, it is an act of defiance. Every testimony spoken, every museum built, every candle lit on a memorial night has one single purpose: to prevent silence from returning. The Holocaust forces us to confront something uncomfortable. Evil is not born from darkness. It grows in the spaces where no one speaks. Genocide doesn't begin with gas chambers. It begins with words, with stereotypes, with us versus them. With the moment we stop seeing a person and start seeing a label. When we forget, we repeat. We can't change the past, but we can choose what we do with its memory. Those who died no longer have a voice, but we do. We are the witnesses now, and as long as we carry their stories, hatred loses power, because every time history tries to repeat itself, memory stands in the way. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and are passionate about this type of content, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future videos and discover more fascinating stories. See you in the next video.